So we're in Market Harbour Basin and we've just walked up to the waste point, and we're still carrying our recycling. And when we got here, I just ran up quickly because we didn't know how long we were staying, and I spoke to a woman because I couldn't find the bins, and she said, "Are you looking for the boaters' waste?" And I said, "Yes, I'm just seeing if there's recycling." And she said, "No, they took it away about a year ago," which is really annoying because in the locker next door, which I assume is for residents, there's 2 recycling bins. So residents are able to recycle, but boaters aren't. And there's still a sign in there that says recycle here, but it's a British Waterway sign by the looks of it, so it's out of date anyway, and they haven't changed it.
Please recycle here, glass, tins, paper and plastic bottles.
And this is a British Waterway sign.
It seems to be a British Waterways sign, because this is the customer waste facility sign, British Waterways, so it's fairly old, and it's got the same, kind of look and everything. So I think it's at least a couple of years old.
Lots of room for bins.
Lots of room for bins. They're all general waste bins. And, this has plastics and metals inside of it, glass.
I wouldn't support all her recycling.
Yeah, which, of course, that's the thing. This is where there's the conflicted message, right? Because that thing seems to indicate you can put it in any of these bins. So,
a little bit frustrated because we're getting mixed messages. We've been told through some sources that when you put recycling into the general waste bins, the contractors who collect the waste then sort it and extract up to 60% of the recycling, and it gets recycled anyway, even if it's in the general waste. But then if you were saying, if you go to the C&rt website,
in multiple places there's an indication that you're not supposed to put any recycling in general bins. It does mention that there are recycling points in various locations, and we think those are what we found, where there's been dedicated recycling bins and a similar sign that says, recycling here.
But on the C&rt website, there's no place that we found that lists which disposal points have recycling and which don't. So we're still in the situation of carrying a month's worth of recycling now.
Yeah, and there is a map that's sort of a pinch and zoom type map, but number one, it barely works on mobile phones, but even if I go onto the computer and use it, it says to zoom in and click the legend button to see which points have recycling points. And if you just look at the legend, there's no mention of recycling points. There's just waste points.
So this led us to call the C&rt, or Michael to call the C&rt on Friday, and got told that the contractor, what was it, the contractor's manager? Or?
Contracts manager would call me back, but then we never got a call back.
And it's Sunday now, so we are not going to leave our recycling here because I don't think it's going to get recycled. The problem is the mixed messages. So the lady before just came and recycled a load of glass in good faith because of the sign. But for all she doesn't realise that it could end up in landfill. Yeah. And so how many boaters are, following that, thinking it's okay if I put recycling in the general waste because it's still going to get recycled, when we don't appear to know for sure if that's the case because of conflicting messages.
And if it is the case, which would be nice, then there's a whole bunch of people
carrying recycling that don't need to.
Yeah, carrying recycling around like us and just don't need to, which, is kind of like a happy problem to have, but it would be good to have clarity.
If the rubbish isn't getting sorted from these 4 bins and recycled, it's absolutely disgusting that that sign is still up, giving people the impression that they're recycling when they're not. So
yeah, that's true.
We will try and find out.
And I see those signs everywhere.
Yeah. Okay. So that was about a month ago in Market Harbour, and after we filmed that little bit, we went to the website to see if we could get any further clarification and looked at the FAQs, but they were a little bit confusing. They weren't completely clear, and there seemed to be some typos, like the sentences didn't fully make sense.
It's not consistently updated, but we've got something that says that during 2015, so 3 years ago, we diverted an average of 67% per month of all the waste produced from customer sites, offices, and blank from landfill. A little bit uncertain what that "and" portion is because there's a word missing there. This says that 67% is diverted from landfill. It does not say 67% is recycled.
So does that mean that it's burnt instead of going into landfill?
Right. And then there's this second line. 47% of this was made up from the recycling that has been separated before collection and recycling that has been sorted through at specialist material recovery centers. 47% of the 67% has been recycled waste. So roughly half of the waste that's diverted from landfills is waste that's in the recycling bins or has somehow been separated at specialist recovery centers. Now, we haven't figured out exactly what a specialist recovery center is.
But it doesn't specify between what was separated by boaters in the customer sites and what was separated
by the C&rt or its contractors, which just isn't specified. And there's been some feedback on our channel and everything where people have said, well, on a podcast or in another video, we saw somebody say that it was 67% recycled. But it's not 67% recycled. It's 67% diverted from landfill, as stated by the C&rt.
So there is confusion out there.
Yeah. And then you get to a portion, about 20% is fuel that has been derived from waste at specialist power plants. Now, is that 20% of this 47%, or is that 20% of the 67%? Like, it's just kind of unclear. And then there's a concrete line that says, what are the general waste bins for? And it says, these bins are for general domestic waste, such as food waste and non-recyclable packaging. Large items such as mattresses and chairs should be taken to the nearest council recycling center. So that's all it says.
So that definitely says, do not put recyclables in the general waste. But above that, it says, some portion of some recyclables that get put in general waste might get diverted from landfill.
Well, it doesn't say specifically portion that goes to general waste. It says percentage that goes to customer sites. So this is the thing where
it's all a bit ambiguous.
It's a bit ambiguous. It's a bit vague.
And we hadn't had a return call that we were promised, so we decided to send an email. And it took a little bit of backwards and forwards until the email actually got to the right person and they understood our questions because we hadn't worded them quite right. They came back with just this like cut and paste from something that didn't answer the question. So finally we got some clarification.
Yeah, what we got from the email is a little bit more specialized. We asked some specific questions. We said, can you confirm if customer sites includes boater waste, just to make sure that customer site is not,
museums and things like
museums that. It's talking about the facility that includes boater waste, and the answer was yes. We then asked, you then go on to state that 47% of this was made up from recycling that's been separated before collection and recycling that's been sorted through at specialist material recovery centers. So we didn't know exactly what that meant. They've clarified to say that the first portion is source-separated recyclables. So this is when there are recycling bins provided, and they're sitting there and marked recycling bins, all of that goes straight to recycling. Number two, recycling materials that have been deposited together with general waste. So there is some level of separation when a general waste bin is found to have recycling inside of it. It may be diverted to a material recovery facility, e.g. mechanical biological treatment plant, to separate the recyclables from the general waste. The general waste is then disposed of at landfill. Or, in another email, we found that some portion of it may be burned to recover, to basically act as fuel.
The interesting word there is maybe diverted.
Yes.
But there's no clarification of whether that's 1% or 100%.
No, but I mean, you got to imagine that you'd kind of have to look at it as it's a human process. So the odds are it's less than 50%. No, they did also say that specialist contractors will not take recyclables in a general waste bin to landfill unless it's heavily contaminated. The contractors have been, given instruction and are sort of empowered to pull recyclables out of general waste.
But you've no way of knowing how much that actually happens and whether they bother to do it or whether some do and some don't, or...
Yeah, and the idea of heavily contaminated, I mean, if you've looked in any of these general waste bins, often whatever's at the bottom is going to have been heavily contaminated simply because of rainfall and everything, So basically, the end game story is if you can save your recyclables until you can get to a location where there's a marked recycling bin, a dedicated recycling bin, save them till then. And then your problem goes away. The vagueness goes away.
So even with the clarification, it's still not
entirely totally clear. And they're being very helpful in sort of giving us additional information, and they're acknowledging that, for instance, the signage that we found at Market Harborough, where it specifically said, it was the old British Waterways sign, and it specifically said that recycling could be left in these bins. It turns out that a year ago in Market Harborough, there had been kind of ongoing abuse of the recycling bins. They'd constantly been filled, I guess, with general waste. That's explained in the email.
But if they went to the trouble of a year ago removing the bins, they should have removed the sign, because people are recycling there in good faith, and the recycling that they're putting in there could very well be going to landfill. So
it will probably be going to
So
landfill.
that sign like urgently needs to be removed and replaced because it's very misleading.
And here's the main point. We currently have a waste strategy review going on nationally to address what is currently the ever-increasing volume and cost of waste that we deal with. And the facilities at Market Harbor are included in this. So basically, there's an ongoing review, which is great, except for how long could that review been going on for? How long will it go on for? It's an unterminated process, so we don't know exactly when this thing finishes, and there's an announcement of this is what strategy.
But we totally understand, like, because I used to complain that there weren't more recycling points, and I totally understand that it's a cost thing and they can't be everywhere. Like, I get that, but what my point is that it should be more transparent as to what happens to the waste. Like, it's not hard to put the information that we got in a much more, plain English way on the website for people to clearly understand, and to make sure that the signage at the general waste bins is correct and not misleading like it is at Market Harbor. And the other thing that would be really useful is to actually have the locations of the recycling points on the website, because at the moment it says you can search for the information, but
it's not very helpful because
you actually can't, because it doesn't identify recycling, it just identifies waste points.
If that app had not just, what you have to do is you zoom in and you see a thing and it shows a sort of waste symbol.
It will show water points and winding holes and moorings and all this really useful stuff.
And then you push a button to show the actual kind of legend of symbols on the map. And there isn't one for recycling points. So all you'll ever see is the waste facilities, which means that all you can do essentially is just stop at each one and go, does this one have recycling?
So yeah, I think in this whole process of trying to get the answers, what's really been highlighted to me is how hard that was, and how there's the misinformation there. So the incorrect signs saying you can recycle at points where you can't. And then, the FAQs not being in, simple to understand English and percentages of percentages. But what would be interesting, is we're not going to go back to Market Harbor for goodness knows how many years, if ever. So we'll have no way of knowing if that sign ever gets updated. So we report it, and then, could be like that for forever.
Yeah, and it's not like it's a critical problem in the same way as a lock failure or anything like that. It doesn't need an immediate response, but we can bag it up and we can keep the recycling.
Now we know what happens.
Yeah.
We can just deal with it.
Yeah, it's fine, right? Like we can carry the recycling until we get to a point where there is a recycling point.
And ultimately we'll try and buy less packaging, which is what we should all do anyway. And it's not a problem for people who've got a home marina, because they can just take it back there, or hire boaters, they can just take it back to the hire boat base. That's not a problem. But it's, when you're on an extended trip and you don't want to be carrying it around, or you continuously cruise, that's when it's a problem.
It's just, if we had more information up front as to where we could accomplish that, it would make life a lot easier.
Oh, that was what I was going to say. Yeah, because where we are now is lovely. There's hardly any plastics floating by, apart from that mayonnaise tub from the pub,
which we recycled a couple of days ago.
But there's so many areas where you just you could fill your boat with plastic on a half-day cruise, but you're kind of like, oh, I don't really want to do that because I've got nowhere to put it afterwards. Whereas if you knew that in 5 miles down the canal there is a recycling point, I'd be happy to get bin bags full of plastic out of the canal
and a net,
and then and do that more than we're doing, and I'm sure other people would as well. But when you've got nowhere to put it and no means of transporting it to anywhere else, what do you do? Anyway, we hope you found this interesting and useful and helpful, and it's something you're interested in as well.
So that's recycling on the canals as of right now. Not bad, could be better.
Love to know your thoughts too. Comment below,
and click the little subscribe-y thingy.